So in year one, I did 250K, which was pretty good. I was using a live masterclass model. So I'd have a live event at a particular date, get people in, and then I'd book sales calls out of that. I refined my masterclass. I invested in a course or a program with a mentor who helped coach me every single week. I did a live masterclass 3 weeks in a row. And on the third week, I made 20K. I made 10K in a day and 20K in a week. And I was just like, okay, we've got this dialed in. And then that went on. In that whole year, we did 1.2 million. And then by the end of the year, we hit $1 million in November and 1.2 by the end, and then 2 million the following February. You need 2 million off Facebook ads. That is not bad, right? I spent a couple $100,000 to get that, but okay, that worked.
If you want to build a legitimate, profitable online business without shiny objects, without the hypey gimmicks, and without the stress and overwhelm, if you want to make more money without having to be present online all day, every day, pumping out content that nobody sees and hustling DMs to generate leads and sales, then this is the place for you. Welcome to the Digital Trailblazer Podcast, your online business university, where you'll learn how ordinary people start from ground zero with no influence, no email list or audience to sell to, and no business or marketing experience, and go from working 9-to-5 jobs to building successful 6- and 7-figure online businesses and all the steps in between. Learn the strategies that worked and what didn't. Learn the mistakes that they made and how to avoid them, and then learn their plans for scaling their businesses and taking things to the next level. All so that you can build your business faster and easier and make more money without sacrificing the things that are important to you in your life. I'm your host, Leah Ray Getz, and with me is my husband, Todd. Now let's get to it with today's guest.
Welcome, Digital Trailblazers. I'm super excited to have with us Dr. Emily Hill. Emily has an amazing story of getting her business going, doing pretty good, for just getting started, and then almost like a hair's breadth away from having to shut it down, and then jumping immediately to over $1 million in revenue. So we're going to dissect all of this and really break it down, where the pain came from, how did it go downhill, how did she turn it around, so that everyone can learn and grow in their own businesses. Before we get into all that, though, Emily, go ahead and kind of introduce what you do so we'll get a little context to the situation here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leah. So I'm Dr. Emily, and I train software developers. I was a professor for over 10 years. I was the program director of a computer science program, and I just pushed that boundary as far as I could. Because when I went to college, I got 3 computer science degrees, and I still had to teach myself how to program. So I found that the system was flawed after 10 years at $250,000, right, invested in my education just to teach myself anyways. I thought something could be improved. So I went on a mission in a university to try and do it, and I did it, but it almost killed me and the students. And so I decided the only solution was to start my own school. So that's how I all began.
So when did this business actually start for you then?
So August of 2021 is when I opened the doors of the academy, but I had been working on trying to create a digital course, understanding online business, since about 2019. Obviously, COVID happened, so that kind of put a little hiccup in there. I changed my focus for a little bit, and then I got right back in. I had a baby in there, and then I got right back into it after we came out of COVID to really start the school.
Okay. So just for a little context, what kind of structure is the school itself? Is it like classroom-led or Zoom-led things? Is it digital courses? How are you serving and helping your folks learn?
Yeah. So we basically took the education model and turned it on its head, because right now, college is great. I taught there for a long time, but it's not necessarily, feasible for most individuals, especially if you're in a career and you want to change. Right? You can't just drop everything, drop your life, and go to college. So what we did is we took the most important elements of the classroom environment, which are the trainings. We made those work at your own pace. So everything is fully remote, online, part-time, 2 hours a day, work at your own pace. But there's an aspect of learning that you can't actually remove completely, is that live interaction. The classroom model is actually not the best way to communicate information, right? Allowing you to give you a problem to see if you've learned something, try it out on your own, and then keep going. That is harder to do in a live classroom setting. But what's really important to do live is that back and forth, that question and answering, because that is where you teach someone how to become self-sufficient through dialogue, right? So our goal is to not just not just to train people with the technologies today, but to give them that foundation so they can solve technological problems for the next 20 years so that they can have a career and be self-sufficient at it. So that requires this live dialogue. So we do that on Zoom. So the trainings are at their own pace. We have live Zoom so that we can teach them how to problem solve for themselves without giving them the answer. You have to have a live dialogue for that. And then we put them in a guaranteed internship where they're actually working as a real software developer on our client projects. So we basically give them their first job, but we make it remote and part-time so they can still do it while they're learning. And we give them access to amazing world-class mentors to help answer their questions. So you can literally like download how someone, a 10-year veteran of experience making hundreds of thousands of dollars in their day job can just tell you how they debug, could just tell you how they would go about solving this problem. So it allows for this really fast and immediate learning transfer, which is so critical in technology because it's always changing.
Let's start with year one, because it was a solid year one, right? Like you weren't like breaking records, but it was still, I think a lot of people would be very satisfied with that. So tell us what you were doing and how that was producing for you for getting the word out on this.
Yeah. So in year one, I did 250K, which was pretty good. I was using a live masterclass model. So I'd have a live event at a particular date, get people in, and then I'd book sales calls out of that. And so at the time, it was really easy because the banks were lending. It was 2021, 2022, and the banks were all lending big. And so as soon as somebody wanted to join, they were able to join. And that was just lovely. We started with this really small group of just a handful of students. And I was still working full time as a professor during that time. But once I got my first pay in full, tuition, I decided that was in November of 21. I decided I could make this work. I could make this full time. And so I planned to leave full time in May of 22. And so that's where, when I was going full time, is where that summer is when we hit that 250K.
So how were you filling your master classes at that point?
So I have always been using Facebook ads. I just found that super easy to do. And at the time when I first started Facebook ads, I ran a 5-day challenge was the first time I tried to sell it. I did that in the summer of 2021 and ads were like super cheap. So it was really easy. And as a researcher, I'm an academic. I love data. And I understand how machine learning works. So I could read between the lines of what Facebook was giving me and make sure that it worked for me. And so I had about like 18, I think I had like 300 people sign up. I spent about $1,800 to get them in the door. And then I sold to, I think like 3 people signed up. So the rates were not awesome, but it was enough to keep me going and validate my idea. I did pay for the ad investment. They were a monthly payment plan. So I collected, and then one person did a higher payment plan. So I broke even the first month, and then every month thereafter was profit. So that was nice.
So what happened after that? Because you were chugging along, and I think a lot of people would love to be at that place where you found a strategy, it's working, you're getting in front of people, you're closing, you're break even, now you're starting to actually get ahead, right? This is where people are like, yay, everything works, I made it. And then sometimes the world just kicks you in the butt a little bit and stuff starts to break. So I'm quite curious on what happened at that point.
Yeah. So my second year, so we did the 250K in my first year. So the timing of this is I had to tell my university that I was leaving. And I did that in November because universities take a year to hire. So I had to tell them. I didn't leave till May, but I told them ahead. And then in January, I found out I was expecting baby number 5. So I was leaving my job, starting my own business, and baby number 5 was on their way. I didn't know this. And so then we did really, really good that summer. And I socked it all away so I could have a maternity leave in the fall because I was still the sole salesperson, the sole person in delivery. Like I was the business still. I hadn't offloaded any of those systems yet. And so I took my maternity leave. That was great in September. And then I went back and I knew when I had a little one, I couldn't do the 3-hour masterclass. So I took the 5-day challenge. I converted it into a 3-hour masterclass. And that's what I had been mostly running that year. And so, because 5 days was just too much. I couldn't handle it. And so I did that. And then I came back to run a masterclass in December and the market had shifted. The market had moved. It wasn't the same game that I had left. Now, I had been trying to build out an evergreen funnel like haphazardly while I was on maternity leave, but it wasn't a big deal. It's like, I'll just run a masterclass in December. I'll make all this boatloads of money. But the bank stopped lending, and the audience had kind of, they pivoted a little bit. So it wasn't quite the same. What was working before wasn't working anymore. I ran the same playbook. It changed. So literally in December, plus I had made like a poor arrangement. I'd overpaid some staff. Like I should have let them go sooner. Anyways, there was like some other things that I'd done as a first-time business owner. So at the end of December, I'm looking at the last $2,000 in my bank account after $250,000. What am I going to do? Because so to give some context, my husband is a teacher, which is wonderful. He covers the childcare, but not much else. I'm the primary wage earner in my home. So when I'm looking at the bottom of the bank account, it's like, I'm not going to do something. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend this. What I got to work. I made enough money to like kind of cover January. And I was making enough money to cover the business expenses, but not our household expenses. That was where I was struggling. And so I made the choice that spring. I decided to take a chunk out of my retirement. And as a professor, we have very nice retirement benefits typically. And so I took a big chunk out to give myself the space to figure these things out. Eventually, though, it was coming towards the end of the school year. So this is in my second year. We're hitting on May. And my husband's salary runs out at the end of June. So I have to make this business go, or I have to get a job. Like there's no two ways about it. So I hunkered down. I refined my masterclass. I invested in a course or a program with a mentor who helped coach me every single week. I did a live masterclass 3 weeks in a row. And on the third week, I made $20K. I made $10K in a day and $20K in a week. And I was just like, okay, we've got this dialed in. And then that went on. In that whole year, we did 1.2 million. And granted, we were just breaking even barely for the first 5 months of the year. Like I wasn't even taking a salary for the first 5 months. And then by the end of the year, we hit $1 million in November and 1.2 by the end, and then 2 million the following February. So we really like, right, we figured it out, and then we went with it. And it was all through Facebook ads because I've been using Facebook ads the whole time. Those were ready to go. So it was easy to scale once I had it dialed in. It wasn't necessarily as easy to systematize and make like a steady system that way, because what I found was that my competitors started to see my ads too and copy what I was doing. I love being a leader in the space, but I was just like, okay. So we've had to like learn to pivot and adapt and things like that. So that's kind of what the takeaway I'm seeing is that I can never just like, you can in business, you can never just like sit there. Like there's always something that's going to be changing. And so it's not like a set it and forget. I'm so used to my computer programs where it is set it and forget it. But people are not that way. Business.
No. So I'm quite curious, where do you feel like, what shifts, if you boiled it down to, that actually started clicking? Like what were the key elements that came together to allow you to have the exponential growth?
So I think it was figuring out how to talk to my people. And one of the things that I did, which I don't know if I'd recommend either, but I did it and it worked for me at the time, is I actually drastically reduced my price. Now, the risk was I didn't know how much it would cost me to scale. So it did bring in a lot of money in the short term, but eventually towards the end of the year, I started to realize, I actually can't serve them at this level once I have so many students. I have to actually make adjustments. But that's what I did to I was able to look at my masterclass, and my mentor, worked with me, and because he had been running a model where people just buy straight off the masterclass, he didn't have to do any sales calls. And so he was like, okay, how many people are staying to the end? And he could see they were all staying to the end, but they weren't buying. So he's like, okay, you have to add these couple elements in. Let's look at your pitch. And then he actually coached me on dropping my price because it would make it irresistible for people. So we did half up front, half once you have the result. And so that worked really, really well. And then I started playing with the pricing a little bit that summer because I dropped it like super low to make sure we did it because, oh my goodness, June is around the corner and my husband's salary is running out. Like this has to work kind of thing. And it did. And it worked awesome. And it worked so well that we were able to start playing with a couple different pricing models. So that's why we were able to increase so easily over the summer. I invested all the profits in additional Facebook ads. And so that worked for a good long time. And then last fall, it started being a little more inconsistent. So that's when we have to kind of dial in and start making a more systematized approach, because the masterclass model worked great before I had employees. And then it was less great because now there's more expenses in business. So we're working on it.
So if you don't mind me asking, what were those price points that you were at? So when you were taking the sales calls, how much were you asking, and then what did you drop it down to? And when you dropped the price, were you still taking sales calls, or were you selling directly on the masterclass?
I was never able to completely get out of sales calls, although my particular audience enjoys texting. So I was doing a lot of text conversations, not always a synchronous phone conversation, although that I did find that helped. Yeah, when I was still doing sales calls for sure. So the price points where we're at, just for education in this space, a coding boot camp that prepares you for a software developer job that will qualify for 70 to 150K is typical starting salary ranges. They cost anywhere from $0 to 40K. So huge range. The good ones are typically capped, like the floor is 10K to 20K for most reasonable boot camps that have high quality outcomes. The free ones tend to be headhunting operations that people don't actually know are not going to serve them. Whereas we are very passionate about serving the individual learner. So we have to have some payment up front because we can't wait till you get a job to pay us back because then we can't offer each individual student what they specifically need to move forward because we're really committed to each student. So we came in at around 10 to 15K is what I was originally charging. And so I dropped it to 2,500 up front with 2,500 after you get your job. So that went like hotcakes because they all could see it was the value. And I would get these complaints from students that were so aggravated to have learned about our system and not be able to afford it, right? They were like frustrated. So when we dropped it, they just went after it. I was a little concerned that while that kept the business going, I got 10K in a day. I was like, whoa, that worked, right? And then I got 20K by the end of the next week. Meanwhile, I had been making like 10K a whole month previously at most, like 6 to 10K. So that was like a huge boom. So I was like, okay, that worked. How can I increase that price a little bit? So then we started doing, we worked our way up to about 4K up front and 4K after. And what we were able to do is offer people a 20% discount if they wanted to pay it all up front. So that actually got us a lot of extra revenue at the end of the summer, even from our existing students, which was lovely. And eventually we realized that some of our students, they have the best of intentions, but life would get in the way. And then sometimes they would decide to give up on themselves. Like we would still be there supporting them week after week, but we couldn't actually lead a horse to water, but you cannot force them to drink. And in education, you are the product. And if you don't put in the work, you cannot get the result. And so then I was like, oh, we're not going to get that second half because there's also a disincentive to tell us that they were hired because now they have to pay us more. So like that was a conflict of interest. So in the end of the fall, we actually removed that. And we just started charging between like around 5 to 6K just up front. Just that's it. We just eliminated the pay up front, pay half piece. And that went pretty well. Over time, though, we have gone back to raising our prices. Once I had more data on what it actually costs to train each individual student, I realized that we really needed to be charging a little bit more. And it also put us, market-wise, it put us in a positioning to compete with these, more robust boot camps because, part of the reason is you pay for what you get, right? And so we were tending to attract the wrong type of learner, someone who is like waiting for things. Here, let me just pay you this money. Where's my job? Versus someone who knows that they need to take ownership and do the work. And so like all of that went into, we actually just returned this summer, returning to our original pricing because we realized that it actually calls in the appropriate learner that we're designed for. And they have a more consistent experience when we do it that way.
That model of paying you after they get a job, like you said, like the first question that came into my mind was, well, how would you know one way or the other? Like you're really putting a lot of trust in them. And I'm not saying that everybody's a bad customer, but there's enough of them out there where that's going to make a difference in your business, right? And so it's just running around in my head, like, how could you do something similar? And I was wondering, well, what if you did a thing where they pay the full price, and then if they don't get a job, they get like a 50% refund or something like that?
Yeah, well, that's a cool idea. What we do instead, and this is what I used to like, because I've tested a couple different things. So what I used to do when I was charging consistently 10 to 15K, and we went back to that, is we guarantee to work with them until they get a job, until they get an offer. And then the incentive is there because it does cost us to keep maintaining,
supporting them through this time. So there's some incentive and some teeth there for us to work with them and make sure they get it, because at the end of the day, we have to invest in them. And if they're not equally invested in themselves, it doesn't matter how much we invest in them, right? They're not moving forward. So we need to make sure that they are also equally invested. It's like, oh, I got this payment. I don't want to keep having this payment without the job. So it's one more way that we can help them be successful, right? Is by actually like helping them commit to themselves and to their future.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, the more I think about that, it's like, well, that incentivizes them not to get a job. Like, we don't want to do that.
Exactly. I know. And I've heard that with income share agreements. This is something that's very common in my space, is that they'll say, oh, we're going to find you a dev job. Don't even pay us until after you get it. But the problem is that in essence, you're finding you're a headhunter looking for the intuitive geniuses that just get it and can teach themselves, and you don't actually have to teach them. I've had enough students and sales calls come to me complaining about a previous boot camp experience from a lot of different boot camps that I know that it happens quite a bit, that they may not be served. And so, that's definitely a factor to consider as well.
One way that I have kind of seen this work in another business, if I don't know if you're familiar with Amazon FBA or, starting an Amazon e-commerce business, but there was a course that I'm sure they still sell it, called Amazing Selling Machine.
Yes, I think.
Yeah, and they've got a really solid program. I bought it, and what they did is it was like at the time it was $6,000, but they gave you $1,000 back after you got to a certain point in the course. Like, if you took action and you did this thing, and like, I think it was like once you put in your first order for your first round of inventory, if you sent them the proof of payment and and shipment and all that, they would give you $1,000 back. And the more I think about it, like, that's really smart, because that, number one, it incentivizes people to actually follow through and take action, but also it can lead to a lot more testimonials and a lot more success stories. So it's like kind of a win-win both ways. But in being able to raise the price of your course $1,000 and then just give it back.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, one of the other things that we do to help lower the price and make it accessible is we offer a peer mentor scholarship. So we are actually quite popular with educators. I'm as an educator myself, I tend to resonate with other educators. And we know that one of the best ways to prepare yourself for a career in tech is to have confidence. So you show up on the interview confidently, but also to be comfortable speaking in this space. And one of the fastest ways to build your confidence is to teach somebody else, because no matter how little you've learned, it's used to help someone. You instantly feel better about your knowledge. And so we actually bake this into our program. We call it the Peer Mentor Program. And so what we've done sometimes, we're bringing this back now, is a peer mentor scholarship. So students can agree to actually contribute and give back, which will also help them be part of the community if they're willing to be a peer mentor as well. So we have a couple different options that we've been using to try and help make this more accessible for people. We've even gone as far as in-house payment plans, because we were working with payment, loan companies that just ended up being a bad fit, or having recourses where they just would take money out of our account without warning, and that was toxic a little bit. So we've been definitely traversing and learning different ways that we can help the students get involved, get the support they need. But I love this idea that you'll get money back, because they might have paid into a loan, and we might be potentially giving them that money back after they do the work, which is like a really cool incentive.
Yeah, I just wanted to circle back for a second to make sure I understood, because you mentioned a couple things with the webinar, working with a mentor, getting that dialed in. As you were kind of starting to explode, was that all live webinars? Did you switch that to automated? Did you do something different? Like, what happened there?
Awesome question. So I haven't personally found that the pre-recorded webinar really works effectively yet. I dream about an evergreen webinar that I can just put on autopilot with ads. Oh my goodness. But here is part of the reason why, is because one of the things I'm selling is live interaction. And so having a live webinar, my audience is very suspicious. They're technologists. I have the most amazing credentials in my space. I don't think there's another bootcamp owner that has 50 internationally peer-reviewed publications with distinguished paper awards and all these accolades. And you can Google them from third-party respectable sites. And I get people telling me that I'm fake. I'm not real. It's like, you can go look at my university. I worked at your university, Montclair State. You can go look it up. Like, you can literally Google me. I'm like meta verified on my Facebook profile. Like, I'm all about authentic. So to have people still claiming that, right? Like, my audience is very, very suspicious of technology and AI. So with that, when I say it's a live webinar and I show up live, sometimes they come just because they don't believe it's really live. It like gets them into the door because they want to be like, no way is it live. And then it is. They're like, oh, and they want to stay because now it's live. Now it's meaningful. Now it matters. So I haven't yet unlocked how to do it as a pre-canned webinar. But I've tested it. I dream about it. And I know once I have everything dialed in, but part of my audience too, they really like the live and they like things that change. My people are innovators and so they like new things. So I haven't quite found out. The best I've done is taken my live content and like put it on YouTube so people can binge later and watch it later. But yeah, I haven't found a way to completely remove the live element yet.
So how often are you running these live workshops?
I like to do them once or twice a month. Over this, when I'm trying to workshop something and like reinvent, I might do it as often as weekly. Depends on like where the leads are coming from. So last year when we were using Facebook ads so successfully, I was doing them usually twice a month or so. And I would get but I could run them back to back weeks because I just used Facebook ads to fill them up. That became prohibitively expensive to get in front of new audiences. We feel like we kind of like tapped out the people that were ready for us. We kind of cleaned out the Facebook land. And so now we're really focusing on getting people into our ecosystem and marketing the live event to them, which means we have to be changing it up because it's the same people all the time.
So does that mean that you're like doing lead gen type ads and now on your list and in your text messages stuff, now you're inviting them once a month or whatever to a workshop? Is that how you're running your ads at this point?
Yeah. And where we're working right now is we found that in the main program, one of the things that happened is we ended up with two audiences in the same delivery mechanism. And so some had an amazing experience and some didn't because they were actually not the right fit. So we had true beginners who really didn't know what they were getting into yet. But now I paid all this money and we're scared and like, oh my goodness, can I really do this? Or like living all the things while they're living it. And then we had students that knew what they were getting into and quickly got jobs and got the training and everything was working flawlessly for them. So what we did is we split our program into a 6-month beginning training phase that also helps overcome this trust issue because it's a virtual school. You can't physically go to campus. They feel like we're not real. This is just my audience. Like they just, I have to deal with it. Like, I was in a business conference this week and they were doing research online for nurses. And they didn't even you couldn't even click on the link of the author. It just said this was Nurse Luke writing this post. And then on people, like technical people, they're like linking to LinkedIn profiles and like collaborative articles. And like, there's just so much authority and trust building that happens in my space. So it's just hilarious. But that's where we were going with it. So now we have the separate beginner phase just for the beginners to help them qualify for 60 to 80K jobs so that they can get financially stable and potentially afford the 10K program if they decide that's what they'd like, or at minimum, have an awesome remote tech job that they love for like a 10th of the cost of our main one. And so we've been finding that those leads have been converting at a much higher rate. So really what I'm doing is I'm learning how to funnel. I'm building out a new system to funnel them into that program. And then the masterclass plus the live events, they just get so much of who we are that it becomes a no-brainer when they're ready to take the next step.
So you're working to build it out where you're generating leads through Facebook ads. And then once the leads, do you still use a webinar to sell them into the lower ticket offer?
Yeah, that's where I'm experimenting like actively right now. Because there's always the risk when you have a high ticket offer and a lower ticket that you might be cannibalizing the higher one. We haven't been seeing that. So it's giving me more confidence that I can start to give a webinar just for the lower ticket. But what I find is that my people, doesn't matter how I sell my live event, I get beginners to advanced. So what I'm really workshopping, actually I'm doing my next one tomorrow, so I've been thinking about this a lot today, is how can I call out the people and direct them to the right place? Because if they're a beginner, we just want to direct them to the beginner phase. And if they're more advanced, then they can hop right into the advanced one. But we actually
got, we had enough challenges with allowing beginners into our full program that we actually don't want true beginners coming there without stopping first. It also gives us 6 months to vet them because I'm guaranteeing them an internship working for us and I'm guaranteeing them a job. Sometimes not everyone is ready for that. So we have an application process. We instituted, we really built things out to make sure that we are getting the right people in the door who are actually ready for this experience because they just have so much more success.
Yeah. How long did you say the masterclass was? How long does it run?
That's a great question. So originally my masterclass was like 2 to 3 hours. The original model I followed was a 4-hour masterclass, but I was like 2 hours, man. That's what I got in me. I have done slightly longer ones with longer trainings. They do tend to be more effective if they're like 3 hours-ish, as long as I'm offering really good content. Right now, though, I'm working to get it down to closer to an hour so that it's more like a webinar. But again, it's based on results. So I just keep playing until I get the result that I want on autopilot and have it dialed in. And, Leah, you'd asked about the paid advertising. The paid advertising has gotten quite expensive. It used to cost us anywhere from $7 to $15 to put someone in the masterclass, but now it really costs more like $30. That's a little high. And if it takes them on average, the average number of days it takes our leads to actually decide they're ready and join is about 45 days, right? About a quarter of them will buy in 2 weeks. That started to become, even if my ROAS is 3 to 5x, only 25% of that is coming in the first 2 weeks. It became like too high, like an outsource outlay of cash, too high a risk. And we've rarely had master classes that didn't at least break even. I think it happened like once in the dozens I've given, but still the fact that it can happen at all, too high a risk for our business. So now that's why we've kind of shifted our model to trying to acquire people through other means. And so now I'm experimenting with organic, using Google searches, placing us, on blog posts, other types of newsletter focus and just different work. Right now we're in testing to figure out like what is that sweet spot, because we need 2 million off Facebook ads. Like that is not bad, right? I spent out a couple $100,000 to get that, but like, okay, that worked. But now we're trying to see for the long-term longevity of the business, can we drop that lead cost a little bit, really hone in on finding our ideal person more quickly. And then we just keep offering the masterclass, because some people go to multiple masterclasses, multiple live events before buying. That's usually a tell that they're in it. They're here for us and we need to help them see that.
So with that rise in Facebook ad costs, do you know what's causing that? Like, have you looked at like your CPMs, your click rates and all that? Like, is there anything changing in there that's causing that to go up?
I think so. My honest opinion, at least in my space, is I think public sentiment. So when I hit the honeypot last summer, and it was just crazy pants, interest in tech was really high, right? So I'm selling a specific type of product. So it's in a space, tech. In the fall, there was massive tech layoffs, right? So in this spring, many of my competitors are now closing, so the survivors, that's good. There was too many. But some of the ones some of our students that got jobs, they came from some of these other boot camps and they actually liked them, but ultimately it wasn't serving them. Some of them are actually closing. So like they had good reviews, they were well renowned, and they're still closing because anyways, I could go on for a really long time about why, that is like, and how our model is different. So it's not an issue for us, but still the public sentiment on boot camps and careers in tech is pulling back. AI is now coming to the forefront. In fact, the Amazon CEO just the day before said how all developers are getting replaced with AI. That is a complete gross oversimplification, but like the public is hearing these things and they don't know which way is up. Now I come and I can tell you exactly what's going on, but if they have trust issues with their information and authority, right? Like innovators don't always trust authority. I don't either. I'm a terrible patient. You don't want to be my doctor because I'm going to doubt and question everything you say. But that is exactly the type of person I'm trying to call in, because I am creating the technologist for tomorrow by building software today. And so like, we're going to get these. So trying to find my right people and help them see that we can help them and serve them as quickly as possible. That's why the live element and the sales call and the one-on-one interaction have been so important, because they literally they're testing to see if I'm an AI chatbot. And they're like, oh, that's AI. I'm not going to talk to them. And it's like, no, here, I'm calling you. Oh my goodness, you're a real human. Yeah, no, we're actually humans here. And the other competitors in my space are bombarding them with automations because they're all technologists too. And they're like, oh, we'll just automate. Who needs to talk to humans? So anyways, that's a space that I've been navigating.
Yeah. And the thing with that is that it's getting more and more convincing too. That's the problem, is that people can't tell. So like you said, they just assume everybody's a chatbot, and it doesn't, even if you're there live. We've had the same thing happens. Like we send text messages out to people who book a call with us and say, hey, by the way, not a robot, blah, blah, blah. I think, was it a couple weeks ago or something? We had a guy reply back like, well, obviously this is fake and you're lying and blah, blah. And like, dude, all right, we're canceling the call. You're not worth even talking to. But yeah, it is kind of a problem, being authentic, because the inauthentic stuff is very closely mimicking like, real people.
To the point where like they even question the authentic. Like that's the thing that flabbergasted me. Like, because I've had people like question if I'm valid or not, or ethical, or like if this is real and legit, and eventually buy, because I was able to like show them. To be honest, the fact that I got offended, I think convinced them. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Because as a professor at my former university, this is not all schools, but my school, Drew University, was the first page of the faculty handbook was all about ethics. Like it was a Methodist-based institution, and so like it had this strong ethical component. It's like that is just baked into who I am. And like, anyways, now I just accept that is like where people are because of AI and all the things that are happening. But at the time, I was.
So another thing I wanted to ask was, you're running these weekly or bi-weekly webinars or masterclasses, and you're promoting them with paid ads. How far in advance are you starting the ads? Is it 1 week, 2 weeks? Or like how far in advance do you start the ads to promote the webinar?
That's a good question. Okay, so there's two different answers to that. When I last summer and before this spring, I usually ran them about 2 days out. If I had to, I'd do it a week, because the people that are most likely to show were the 2 days before. I used to run them Thursday nights. And so I would start ads, would have to start warming them on Sunday because Facebook can't handle turning them on for like 10K a day and turning them off. So I'd have to warm them up a little bit, and I'd push it I'd double the ads a couple times a day and then see if they tanked, and then I'd pull back. So it was like this very constant, like handsy thing. But we realized that was also partially driving our costs up because Facebook's now greedily just trying to get in front of anybody. So what we did this spring, we started to do is just run them constantly for a low amount a day. So like we always have our next masterclass planned out. And so after one, we just switch over to the next one. And so we're like doing constant lead gen, but it was driving to a day. I also suspected that was also causing the cost to go up because they'd have to also be available at that day and time to want to sign up. So that's why we're really moving towards this model. I'm trying to get the self-liquidating funnel down. So I have like a very small, tiny offer to get them started coding, get them into our beginner offer, and then we'll continue to sell them from there. In fact, we did a small run of about 24 students in our beginning program in June. And I would say almost half of them have bought up into our main program at this point. So like that is really converting well. So I want to scale that. I sold it to my current list. So I have to kind of go get new people for that. But like that trajectory is really working, especially because now that I recognize and own that my audience has trust issues, having them live our approach and see that it works for them sells them better than anything I could say in a live event.
And then for your show rate on those webinars, I know for live webinars, everyone across the board is complaining that, live show rates are down. What are your show rates on your live webinars?
Oh, good question. So the range that I have seen personally is 10 to 40%. There are things that direct it. So normally we're around 25 to 30. And that's if we do some setting, some warm reach out, some phone calls, right? Like there's things that we can do to improve it. 10% occurs if I do zero nurture. Like if they just sign up and I do nothing to talk to them. I tested it once. It's like, 10%, that's so good, right? But then if we text them back and forth, now it's not working as well because people are smarter to AI and they think they get that our automated texts are automated, don't think it's worth applying, even though a real human's going to, we might say, hey, how's it going? a real human's going to reply, but they're so jaded, they don't see that. So having a phone call in there, I definitely noticed that'll get the show up rate from 15 to 20 to 25 to 30, 35 typically for us.
Okay, gotcha. This whole conversation is incredibly interesting to me because it's like Leah and I went through the same journey back in like 2017, 2018. And it's like the things you're saying, like and the things you tried to test it and the show rates, and like we experienced like the same thing. We had a live webinar, and selling people into an online course, and as far as the revenue and the show rates, it's like this is exactly what happened to us. It's like deja vu. And you're right. It's like you have the same problems, and then you'll work for that next solution, and then the next solution happens, and then you run into another problem, and then it's like you got to find another solution, and it's so amazing. And the revenue was almost exactly what we were doing too. As far as the first year versus second year, and for us, like the big leap was being able to automate that webinar and not having to do it every single week. Like for us, that took us from 20 to 40,000 a month in revenue to suddenly 200,000 in revenue. And we didn't have to show up live every week. Right. But along with that, just like you said, when you're scaling up your ads and you're scaling things up, well, the revenue went up, but also the profitability went down. The profit margins went down. You're still more profitable in the end. We had more money, but
the rate of profitability goes down. Yep.
And the scalability of the problems and things you have to solve goes up very quickly too. So we had all kinds of
Oh, yeah. No. Oh, my goodness. I went through last fall. It seems like in the fall, these things hit. So I overhired, and then I had to let people go. And it was like, yeah, it's been a real learning experience, like how to scale it on the backside. Right. So now I'm doing a little bit more of the work on the backside, but I'm now building out the systems. Now I understand what goes into a system, because I hired people and I kind of punted these jobs and was like, here, I do this. It's easy. You can do it. And I didn't build any of the systems. I didn't even have SOPs on what to be doing. It was just like, anyways, so I learned a lot. We definitely had some growing pains going from 250K to 1.25. And so now the name of the game for me moving forward right now is consistency. Like, even if we're not, I don't know, like we're on track to hit 1 million this year, but like, even if we didn't, right, it's like having that consistency that I can count on, month in, month out is way more valuable to me right now than the actual number itself. Because last year I was like, I thought all my problems would go away if I just hit $1 million. let me hit $1 million, right? And then I realized like, oh wait, but now I got all these students and I don't know how to scale in my system. And I got all these. I was like, these would be lovely problems to have. And then I had them. I was like, oh, maybe I should have scaled a little bit more slowly.
Yeah. Oh, now you got $1 million problems. Yeah.
Right. I got the different ones, but you keep moving forward. Like, it wasn't like I had to start everything from scratch, but I'm reinventing the sales process a little bit more. But now I know more, and I know more about the students that thrive in my program versus those that take more of our time to serve. Right. So now I can kind of optimize and call them out. And so, we always learn in kind of like a circle. In software development, we do this too.
So right now you're working on this self-liquidating offer funnel. So is your plan so you're selling them into a low ticket course, and then you're upselling them a little bit. I assume you're calling those leads, and then are you selling those leads into your full program from there, or are you still doing webinars off the back of that, or how are you doing that?
Yeah, I'm still doing webinars because I find that's been the most effective to kind of like call out people who might be ready. The live event just gets them to show up, the FOMO of the live event. And then that opens up the door for conversations there. And then we usually encourage them to apply at the event. I'm trying to figure out how to differentiate them a little bit, so the beginners are just joining the lower ticket offer, and then the more advanced students are applying, so I can get on a call with them. So we actually have like 3 levels. We have our main program, which is in the 10K range, or depending on the level of support that they want. And then our beginner course is only $1,000, but it offers the same support as the main one. And so it's low ticket but high touch, because we want them to see and have a taste of what we offer. And this is also the part of the program that's the least expensive for us to maintain. So like the guaranteed internship piece, where we're basically giving them their first job before they know how to do all the things yet. That is like a very expensive learning model for us to deliver on. So it also helps us make sure that we're getting the right people in the door for that. But there's also the very, very first week of the training to teach you. I can get someone started learning how to code with the basics in just a couple hours. And it's like amazing that I'm saying that because I've had people tell me that so many times. They're like, oh my goodness, I was learning for years
And in 2 hours, you taught me more. We're like, I learned more in a month than in 6 years of getting degrees, right? Like you can really accelerate that. So we have a $7 piece. That's what I'm planning to do as my micro offer with the Facebook ads and building that piece out. So that I'm still working on that, on fine tuning the ads to really, the copy to really call out our ideal person, and to get the pages so that it sells it without the live event. So we don't have that yet. People are buying it, but after a conversation. So I'm still in the phase where I'm like learning, okay, what do they need to hear to make this happen so I can scale that? So it's a long-term process of market research and getting the results and then.
Well, awesome, Emily. This has been a great conversation. We really, really appreciate it. I hope it has inspired and informed our audience on the journey ahead as they tackle that. So if people want to check you out or learn more about you, where should they head?
Awesome. Techjoy.software is our website. TECHJOY.software.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us, Emily. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was great to be here.
You've been listening to the Digital Trailblazer podcast. For show notes and information about today's guest, head to digitaltrailblazer.com. Now, if you love this episode, if you got some value, make sure you leave us a review and subscribe. And be sure to share this episode with anyone you know who could use help to build their business. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.